Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
The first question today is Donald Trump beginning to lose his nerve or panic with less than 100 days left for US presidential elections. Now, panic is different from butterflies in the stomach. As Sunil Gavaskar used to say, that even after he had got so many hundreds, when he went out to open the batting until he faced the first ball, he used to feel butterflies in the stomach. That is different. Maybe a little bit of stage fright. But a politician going into elections, when he talks about the need to postpone elections, and that too indefinitely, you know that that politician is in trouble, which is what Donald Trump is now saying. It's a bit like school kids hoping, and we were terrible when we were in school, and I think a lot of the school kids are hoping that somehow this exam should be postponed because I am not prepared for it, even if some calamity happens, or if somebody important who has to depart prefers to depart on that day. So only those who are not prepared want exams postponed. Similarly, only those who now fear they might lose the election want elections postponed, knowing that such a thing is a near impossibility, and we'll explain to you how. There are other elements also to Trump's panic. First of all, for the past several months, he's now been saying all opinion polls are rubbish. So as long as opinion polls were suiting him, he was fine with them. Once they turned, because until March, opinion polls were quite favorable to him. He was doing fine. In fact, when Narendra Modi went to Houston and said, "Ab ki baar Trump Sarkar," the call was that Trump is unbeatable, because Democrats also used to be killing each other in a manner of what Barack Obama had then called a circular firing squad, where friends stand around in a circle and fire at each other with machine guns so everybody gets killed. But that changed dramatically. And as the polls showed that changed mood, Trump began to rubbish the polls. So much so that he went to the extent of saying that he will now set up a group of his own which will investigate every opinion poll that he finds fake, which essentially means every opinion poll that doesn't give him a victory or that doesn't put him ahead. So that is panic. Number two, Twitter. That is the medium he loves so much. He lives by Twitter, so much so that people now keep a count of his tweets since he became president. So in fact, he put out the tweet in which he sort of insinuated that it's better to postpone elections, was his 13,087th tweet as president. Now, for somebody who lives by Twitter, he now has complaints with Twitter trends, because even Twitter trends have turned against him. So see, what did he say? He said, "So disgusting to watch Twitter so-called trending, where so many," and I'm stretching this so because he's used 5 O's, "where so many trends are about me and never a good one. They look for anything they can find, make it as bad as possible and blow up, trying to make it trend." This is really a lover's stiff. Trump loves Twitter and now is fighting with Twitter. It's a meltdown. And then he goes on to say, really ridiculous, illegal, and of course, very unfair. Now, the most powerful man in the world is causing something unfair, and that too, Twitter. That tells you, now we know that Donald Trump, he is not somebody you assess in terms of conventional politics or politicians, but even by his standards, this is a meltdown. You can spell it in all capitals. Then you can see other signs of panic. For example, he had sent a cease and desist notice to CNN, his favorite news channel, in June, when they had a poll predicting that he is going to lose this election. Now, first of all, if he's panicking, and this is a very important point, if he's panicking, can he postpone elections? Is it even theoretically possible? So first of all, you would think that, okay, if the Prime Minister wants somebody, say in our country, has a majority, Parliament wants it, you can swing it, Election Commission, you can say, all right, for this reason or that, postpone it. In fact, already there are demands in India right now to postpone Bihar elections, but once again from who? from the opposition side, from the side that's weaker. So usually this demand will be made by the side that looks weaker, and then realpolitik will tell you that the side that is so weak that it fears an election, even if it's in power, is unlikely to have the equity to be able to fix an election or postpone an election, because it has to work through the system, which means millions of people. But that besides, in America, the legal and constitutional situation is such, a position is such that it's almost, it is an impossibility for the president to have an election postponed, because American original constitution talked about election being entirely a responsibility of the Congress. It gave the executive branch no power in terms of when to hold the election. Then, to give it greater clarity, in 1845, there was an amendment to US Constitution called the 12th Amendment, which said that presidential election day will now be governed by the Congressional Act. So that day is the Tuesday following the first Monday falling in the month of November after every 4 years. So this year that Tuesday is November 3. November 2 is Monday. So that is the first Monday of November. November 3 is Tuesday. The president therefore has no powers to make any changes, he or the cabinet. Now go beyond that. So after 9/11, there were many thoughts, because the whole world was worrying about terrorism. That what happens if there is a catastrophic terror attack just as you are going into elections? Who can postpone elections? Suppose you have to postpone elections. So there was a congressional paper done, of which I will share the text with you, but I will tell you a couple of lines. So that paper said in 2004, the executive branch does not currently have the authority to establish or postpone the dates of elections, and what mechanisms are in place to deal with such an event. Then it goes on to note that under the separation of powers doctrine in America, if the Congress so wishes, it can delegate to the president standards, delegate to the president powers to change these dates, etc., but to the standards that can be judged by a court, which means even if the Congress were to give this power to the president, American Supreme Court will decide whether it is constitutional or not. Given the constitutional position, it's most unlikely that will. But even that becomes a purely theoretical question, because even if the Congress were to change the 1845 law, even for that, Donald Trump would need a majority in the Congress. Republicans do not have a majority in the Congress. The Democrats have a majority in the Congress, so it's not going to happen. And second, in the American system, unlike in the Indian system, there is no whip system. So people of your party are not bound to vote for you. And if Trump thinks, or you should not presume that just because it's Trump's party, everybody in the Republican Party will vote for it, because it doesn't work like that in America. In fact, Rodney Davis, who is the ranking Republican member of the House Administrative Committee, which oversees the elections also, he has just tweeted, there will be no delay in the 2020 election. Congress sets the election date and it should not be changed. It will be held on November 3 as planned and required by law. He said it, he stated it very clearly. And then you had the three former presidents arriving at John Lewis's funeral. John Lewis, as we know, was a great civil rights activist, black lawmaker, legend who passed away. So three former presidents, Barack Obama, Junior Bush and Clinton, came there wearing masks, and they made speeches that almost in their own ways sounded like they were not approving of the way Trump was approaching this politics. And Obama has gone to the extent of attacking Trump for trying to undermine United States Postal Services. Why United States Postal Services matter, I will tell you. So what is Trump saying? Trump is saying, I don't mind if absentee voting takes place by mail, which means, say, as in India, if you're a soldier posted on the borders, you can send your ballot by mail. That he doesn't mind. But what he minds is that because of the pandemic this year, you can be at home, exactly what was being planned in Bihar earlier. You can send your vote by mail. Now, he says, I can't trust the United States Postal Service with delivering on time. Now, that because these will have to be delivered by mail. In our country, as you know, only ballots that have reached before the boxes are opened are counted, and in fact, first the postal ballots are counted. In America, given the complex federal system that is, different states have different rules. So there are some states which insist that ballots will only be counted if they are already there on the day of the voting. But there are many other states which follow the postmark rule, which means they will accept the ballot papers as votes as long as the envelope in which they come are postmarked, जो ठप्पा लगता है, जो स्टैंप लगती है postman की, that is of a day prior to the date of voting. Now, it gets further complicated because under Barack Obama, the budgeting of the United States Postal Services had been cut because under his administration, every department of the government had to cut its expenses. So, very often even what is called as first class mail is now delivered in 5 days in America. So, the fear is that in many of these states, these votes will not arrive on time, and if they will not arrive on time, then they will not be counted, and states in which they might not be counted are really very crucial states, which are the battleground states in America. So that has led Donald Trump into finding this new excuse. So he said in his tweet, he said 2020 will be the most inaccurate and fraudulent election in history. Delay the election until people can properly and safely vote, and he puts a question mark there because he also knows that he doesn't have the power to delay the election, but he's creating noise and he's creating confusion. Now, he had said even before the 2016 elections that if he loses, he will not accept the result of that election. Now, in America, we'd like to believe that institutions and systems are so strong that a candidate cannot do it. But here is an incumbent president. He says, I may not accept the election if I think this is unfair. Most unlikely that in the American system, he can do it, particularly if the other side wins by a reasonable majority. But we raised this question with Fareed Zakaria in our off the cuff just earlier this week and asked him this, and he said, look, if the election is a clear verdict, it's okay, but if you have a situation where some key bellwether states or battleground states have very small margins and he asks for a recount, in which case many other states are not yet finishing their counting because they take postal ballots until they come in as long as they are postmarked a day before the polling day. So that process will go on, and again he can ask for a recount. So in case of a narrow result in the key states, even in the key states, doesn't matter if Biden wins a landslide in California and New York, he can create sufficient mess, take it to the court, and if that happens, then other possibilities open up. So there are those issues. Now, how this postal thing works, for that again, read an article by Steve Coll. Steve Coll used to be the Washington Post correspondent in Delhi for a long time. Wonderful man. He's written great books on terrorism in the AFPAC region, etc., etc. He's also Dean of Columbia School of Journalism now. He's written an article in New Yorker, of which I'll share a link with you. He says that, look, you have to understand how this thing works. So, for example, some key battleground states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Arizona, they insist on postal ballots arriving by the voting day. And he says that, look, in the 2018 midterm congressional elections, what happened in these states, you should not forget. In Arizona, 3,000 of the mail-in votes were rejected because they came late. In Georgia, 7,000 were rejected because they came in late. In case you have a close election in any of the bellwether states, then 2,000 or 3,000 make a very big difference. So can you take that chance? Obviously, you cannot take that chance. And that is what Trump is counting on, that if he is not winning, he will have the excuse to create enough mess at that point. And this is how he's setting up his strategy. So read an article by Nick Cheeseman, who's a professor in University of Birmingham. I will give you a link. It's an article in Washington Post where he says that there are 4 ways in which Trump is trying to undermine the political process and the elections. One, he's discrediting the system. Just as he had done before 2016, he said this is the most rigged election. Of course, when he won it, he said it was fine. In 2018, midterm congressional elections, he said this was the most infected election in American history because he did not so well. Second, he uses the tactics of divide and rule, which goes to the extent of encouraging violence against his opponents. Number 3, he uses the tactics of suppressing the vote, which many strong-arm leaders do. And how do you suppress the vote? In America, it is through the voter registration process. Very much like our own electoral rolls renewal. But in America now, there are so many different documents required, and different states have different rules. America is not run by one central election commission. Different states have different rules that require different kind of documentation. And 30 states have accepted these tougher rules now. So the kind of documentation you require to get registered as a voter is something that will put blacks and Hispanics particularly at a disadvantage. And as we know, those are by default Democratic voters. Those are not Trump's voters. In fact, Trump has gone so far as to say, he tweeted earlier this week, and this was really a divisive tweet, where he said the middle class, the suburban middle class doesn't have to worry if I come to power. You will have to not worry about any low-cost housing coming up near your neighborhoods. What does it mean? It means the poor, which means the blacks, Hispanics, minorities, they will not come and live near where you live. So this is really exclusivity of habitation. So he's using this tactics for voter suppression. So some of the people who are unlikely to vote for him are not able to register for votes. And number 4, this is again according to Nick Cheeseman, distort the truth, attack the media. That goes on all the time, non-stop. Now, if we have established that Trump is panicking, we have also established how impossible it is for him to get an election postponed. We've also explained to you how he is discrediting the process, which can be helpful or can give him some window in case it turns out to be a very narrow election result, which at this moment does not seem to be a possibility, but you never know. Funnier things have happened in politics and cricket. These things can happen. Where is he coming from? Why is he panicking so much? So if you look at all the data that's now coming out, if you look at all the opinion polls, they are all putting Biden now decisively ahead of Trump. So if you look at 538, that's the poll we talked about in the past also. 538 is the number of electoral college votes in America. So this group 538, it collates data from all the major opinion polls. So 538 June 1 showed Biden at 49.2%, Trump at 42.9%. So Biden had a lead of 6.3 on June 1. July 1, Biden at 50.9%, Trump at 41.4%. So Biden's lead had gone up to 9.5. That's also when a lot of the writing and stuff was going on. July 19, Biden is still 50, Trump is 41.7, so gap is still 8.3. So it's a consistent lead. It's not coming down. You might see a little fluctuation here and there, but it's not coming down. Once again, if you see the mid-July ABC Washington Post poll of registered voters, it gives Biden 55%, Trump 40%. It's a 15% gap. This gap in May was only 10%. This gap in March was only 2%. So not only is this gap increasing, it is doing so consistently, and a pattern is now established. And as we know in elections, once a pattern is established, it's very difficult to reverse it. Then you look at what is called as battleground states in America. Those don't look pretty for Trump as well. In fact, last time he won an unlikely victory because he won some of these unlikely battleground states, which are Democratic strongholds. So Florida, if he doesn't win Florida, it's almost impossible for him to win this election. That's what Fareed Zakaria also said to us in Off the Cuff, and please check it out. In case you missed it, I will give you a link again today. So Florida now, Biden is up 6%, and there are experts. There is an article in Financial Times which says that in Florida now it looks like Biden is getting the older white voters back to the Democratic Party who had left it in 2016. Michigan, Biden is up 8%. Pennsylvania 6.6%. Then in states which Trump would have won or would have counted on winning, that is Iowa and Ohio, his lead is now very thin. In Iowa it's 1%, in Ohio it's only 0.4%. So all of this, when you look at this, it shows you trouble. Then you want more evidence. Michael Tesler, who's an election expert, writing in 538, he says that there's some other pointers. For example, 80% of Biden's voters are very negative on Trump in the polling category, whereas only 53% of Trump voters poll very negative for Biden, which means the chances of people changing their minds are more on one side than on the other. Economist in its tracker, I know it's not perfect, but the Economist in its tracker now puts the odds of Biden winning at 92%. 92%. 92 is a very interesting number. That's the percentage of seats the BJP won in 2019 elections, wherever it was a contest between BJP and the Congress party. So that number stays stuck to my mind, that percentage stays stuck to my mind. Then Gallup poll. In May, between May and June, it showed a 10% fall in Trump's popularity. That is quite precipitate. It's quite drastic. From 39% in June, his 39% approval rating is affirmative, 57% is negative. In May, it was 49% positive, 48% negative. And finally, as we had told you earlier, in the American system, in the systems where betting is legal, you can check your odds, you can go to websites, check, you can bet. Sometimes you find that they know the hawa better than even opinion pollsters. In India, when elections happen, people say, "Arey, Satta market mein kya rate chal raha hai?" But Satta markets are illegal, and a lot of stuff is hearsay. In this case, it's transparent and open. So if you see the betting in America, so go to bookies.com, Biden plus 167, Biden minus 167, Trump 150. What that means is that if you are betting on Biden, then to win 100 rupees, you have to bet 167. To simplify, you bet 167 saying Biden will win. If he wins, you will get 267 back. You get your principal back anyway. On Trump, you bet 150 to win 100 rupees, which means the odds on Biden winning are higher by that much. Again, another website, Odds Checker. These are well-known websites. Trump has 5:8, which means if you invest 8 rupees, you will win 5 additional on Biden. But Trump is 17/10, which means Trump, if you invest 10 rupees, you will get 17, which means odds of Biden winning are higher, odds of Trump winning are lower. And this, if you check around, you find everywhere. There is the predictor, there is Smarkets. You will find that Biden's victory chances are 63%, Trump's are 30%. Odds Checker again puts the odds at 62.5% for Trump, about 62.5% for Biden, I apologize, and 34.6% for Trump. But before I let you go, because I want to leave you with a smile, also a little bit of intrigue, that if you look at the number of people who are betting and the amount of money that's being staked. So in spite of the fact that the bets on Trump, that the odds on Trump are much poorer than the odds on Biden, a lot more people are betting money on Trump than on Biden. So about 63% of all the bet money being placed in the US betting market is on Trump, not on Biden. Now you could call it anything. You could say, if you're a true believer in Trump, you could say that Trump's true believers, Trump's true faithful know better even than the betting markets. If you are more rational, you could say, oh, this is really Trump bhakti. So these people will put money on Trump no matter what goes. And maybe more conventionally thinking, this is just the gambler's mindset that, gamblers like to take risks. So go and put some money where higher risk is. Let us see, lottery hai, kya hota hai. But as things stand right now, if you value your money, you will bet it on Biden, not on Trump. You will not win as much as you might win if you betted on Trump, but he won. But the chances of Trump winning are very low now, and they are getting lower by the day. Remember, it is just over 90 days left.